Chapter 5. The Evolution of the Tattvas. In the evolution of the Tattvas, we trace the evolution of the soul to its beginning in the involution of the spirit. The one is as inseparably connected with the other as are the interacting energies of the positive and negative life currents, the outbreathing and the inbreathing of the divine spirit, or the thought active and the thought quiescent, upon which all life and motion depend. Thus, spiritual activity is the creator of all things, and the energy behind all motion, without which creation is unthinkable, derives its power from the one source. The first manifestation of that power was positive and negative, the active impressing its thoughts or action upon the receptive passive, and Akasha was the first tattva evolved by the interaction of these divine currents of spiritual force. The cosmic void of undifferentiated matter, the Hindus' Prakriti, was formless, and the first need of differentiation was the space in which to create many forms. Therefore, the characteristic property of Akashic vibrations is to make space, and the closer the impact of matter upon the vibrations, the louder is the sound of their movement. This is the reason of the phenomenon that natural philosophy explains as the denser the medium, the better conductor is it of sound. The homely and familiar comparison, in the Aitareya Upanishad, by the learned Hindu teacher, of the ether, that is, the Akasha, to a bowl in which all the other elements were poured, is extremely felicitous and graphic. In very fact, all the other tattvas, one after the other in their turn, were evolved and are continually mingled in the spaces of Akasha. Akashic energy, expressed as sound, has long been recognized as both the builder and disintegrator of form. The wonderfully beautiful geometrical forms into which dry sand, sprinkled upon a drumhead or upon a sonorous plate, will move under the impulse given by musical tones show the ever-formative effect of Akashic vibrations. It was through an ingenious device of the German philosopher Chladni that sound vibrations were first made visible circa 1785. He observed that plates of metal or glass gave out different sounds according as they were struck at different points, and he conceived the idea of strewing the surface with fine sand and drawing a violin bow across the edge of the plate, while damping the vibrations at certain points by touching the edge with his fingertips. This established nodal, or rest, lines along which the sand grains shifted, showing the form of the vibrations, and by varying the points of contact, both for drawing the bow and damping the vibrations, a great variety of beautiful figures were produced corresponding with varying tones. It was thus found that a given tone always produced the same figure. So the experiments disclosed an unvarying law of sound vibrations. Illustrations of these sand forms, called Chladni's figures, can be seen in Tyndall's Sound and in most textbooks upon natural philosophy. They are of particular interest in our study because they betray the presence of all the tattvas in manifold combinations in the different musical tones, and show how their characteristic vibrations are modified by interaction one with another. Efforts to establish the laws of tonal color should investigate this field. For color, following form in cosmic manifestation, is inseparably connected with it, and as invariable as the form. Each may be recognized by the other. Helmholtz discovered that every color has its special vibration, that is, form. But he drew the false inference therefrom, that the secondary colors were not formed from the primaries. The Tattvic law corroborates the original conception, and by its means the presence of any element can be detected by the known influences, or effects, of the blending of colors. In the realm of hidden forces, every audible sound is a subjective color, and, vice versa, every visible color is an inaudible sound. Both proceed from the same potential substance which physicists use to call ether. Occultists pronounce it plastic, though invisible, space. The deeper we study the Tattvic law of the universe, the deeper is our conviction that everything in the natural world moves rhythmically. It is only when the human mind steps in with its responsibility of free will to choose the right or the wrong thought and act that life's rhythm is broken and all its vibrations thrown into a discordant jangle. There is a center of unity in all things, the ever-present Akasha, and creative power, working in this center, always manifests itself with our Shmic harmony, holding as it does every form, and therefore all colors, potentially. Akasha at all times foreshadows the qualities of all the Tattvas, and intervenes between every two. Every progressive step in the evolution of the Tattvas is instinct with divine intelligence, preparing the way for the crowning effort of creation, man with his manifold activities, equipped to con the evolution of the Tattvas 61 qua and dominate the vast realms of inanimate nature. Space having resulted from the interaction of the positive and negative currents of Akasha, there was room for locomotion, and the spheres of Vayu appeared next and began to whirl in the Akashic vortices, born of the union of the Akashic currents. Again, I must refer to the illustrations of Professor Loeb's biological work in the September 1905 Cosmopolitan. For, as far as that spark of laboratory-created life progressed, it corroborates the Hindu revelation of the evolution of the Tattvas and the law of their several activities and influences. After Vayu, the next need was heat to expand the air. Therefore we find that the mingling of Vayu vibrations with Akasha produces tedious vibrations of light which generate heat, and which manifest their presence in this dual character. Through the action of heat upon air, water is formed. Hence Oppa's vibrations were the next result of creative energy, and the combined activities of the other Tattvas condensed water into Prithvi vibrations, completing the primary differentiations of cosmic matter. Thus, with the fifth Tattva, the self-conscious universe, an ocean of subtly fine, psychic matter, came into existence. By successive interaction, following the established law, the Tattvic vibrations becoming ever coarser in their descent, the other planes of existence through the mental to the physiological were evolved, till the involution of the spirit in the terrestrial elements was completed, and the earth with its teeming life whirled in space. The evolution of the soul thus involved is man's task in his earthly pilgrimage, and it is alone through spiritual thinking and living that he can make that task a daily joy, and feel the exhilaration in facing every duty which more than half accomplishes the work. A spiritual philosophy of life is the foundation of all right thinking and living. In it is found the solution of Ruskin's assertion. It is only by labor that thought can be made healthy, and only by thought that labor can be made happy. Health is the mainspring of all successful effort, and the spiritually alive soul can command health as the first blessing. It is the natural and inevitable reward of right thinking and spiritual living. That is, living under the direct guidance of the soul. When we consciously subordinate the physical to the spiritual, all the atoms in our bodies feel an impulse toward order from the rhythmic flow of the Tattvas, and even the most rebellious yields to the magnetic attraction and vibrates in harmony with the prevailing rhythm when the currents are fully established and maintained in perfect equilibrium. This is the secret of all the miraculous recoveries of bed-ridden invalids. For in moments of supreme exaltation through faith or enthusiasm, the Tattvic currents are raised to so high power as to sweep all obstructions from their path, and to impart synchronous action to the hitherto warring elements, which almost instantly thrills the body with a sensation of strength. The higher we raise our vibrations through the purifying action of rhythmic breathing and beneficent thinking, the more we shall be in touch and cooperate with the finer forces round about us, their waves even breaking over us and waiting for our recognition to lift us to higher states of efficiency, of comprehension, of intuition, of power to think and to do. Spiritual perceptions and spiritual strength make possible a degree of activity, both mental and physical, a power of accomplishment in a given task, utterly beyond the capability of mere physical energy. Work which on the physical plane is effort, becomes a joy and an inspiration when we call to our aid our ever-ready, ever-waiting, spiritual forces. It is the attitude of thought which makes all the difference, because every atom of energy in the physique has its source in the spirit, but on the material plane of manifestation, as when we speak of mere physical strength or brute force, the vibrations are grosser in character, unfit material for the spirit's activity, therefore, lacking entirely the spiritual fire which sustains enthusiasm and gives electrical force to every thought and act thus inspired. It is this spiritual energy which in rare emergencies and moments of supreme excitement enables people to forget the limits of physical strength and to execute the ordinarily impossible. I knew a very delicate young girl, the accepted estimate of whose strength and endurance exempted her from even the usual exertion of daily life in the home, who, under the excitement caused by a disastrous fire very near, moved several inches out from the wall a bookcase 8 feet high which was filled from floor to top with heavy books. It was all that 3 strong men could do to put the case back in its place the next morning. We can train ourselves to employ this spiritual energy at need, and thus eliminate many of the most trying conditions in life. The wastefulness of common methods of thought is a constant drain of psychic energy which we can better employ. Every fact that has been stated can be verified by personal experiment, which means persistent practice of the breathing and concentration exercises already given. Not intermittent practice when you are reminded of it by bad feelings or when you happen to think of it or have nothing else you would rather do. To derive the benefit, spiritual, mental, and physical which I assume all my readers are seeking, the practice must be regular and at the regular periods as nearly as possible the same daily. Never let any of the exercises become automatic. Hold the mind to the center. I have tried to make it very clear that the purpose of the exercises in alternate breathing is to restore the balance of the tattvas and the alternating currents of prana, positive and negative, the inequality of which is the primary source of all disease. Habitual breathing should be as full, deep, and regular as conscious direction from time to time can make it. Habit is everything in this, and in forming good habits nature comes to our aid with joyful alacrity. I have failed utterly in my purpose if I have not convinced you that physical, mental, and spiritual harmony are promoted by habits of rhythmic breathing in the purest air obtainable. It need not be cold air to be pure, but it must be fresh, unbreathed air. Continued practice of the exercises will convince you that you are treading the long-hidden, closely guarded path leading to nature's treasury of secrets. If your interests and pursuits are scientific, before your clearing vision wall after wall, hitherto baffling, will fall, disclosing long vistas cleared and ready for your seeing eyes with assured foundations, basic laws, inviting your fascinating experiments into the myriad permutations of these marvelous forces. Never for an instant are they inactive, but ever building and disintegrating the visible and the invisible universe, involving and evolving through their vibrations every atom therein contained. Chapter 6. The universality of the Tattvas. It should be plain to all my readers now that to neglect proper exercise of the lungs by deep, full inhalations of pure, unbreathed air, is a positive self-limitation of vital force which can be justly named slow suicide. The individual thus living, even under the most fortunate circumstances otherwise, never attains the maximum of his or her efficiency and power, and invites every disease. You thus feed the disintegrating forces with the corruption which increases their activity, and shut out the renewing elements which upbuild, while furnishing the stimulus to cast out the worn-out products of physical energy. And this manner of living, which is the confirmed habit of multitudes, is the progenitor of most of the ills from which humanity suffers. The day is dawning when that infamous old aphorism anent the ills that human flesh is heir to will be recognized for what it is, the hideous subterfuge of ignorance and credulity. It has caused the most flagrant violations of natural law, and weighed like an incubus upon the human race, encouraging fear and every other prolific agent of evil and suffering, being a common source of that weakness and inefficiency which produce poverty. Fear breaks down tissue and disorganizes nerve cells as much as any acknowledged disease. It is only blindness to the latent, the potential, powers within that makes possible the conditions from which a majority of mankind suffer daily. As I shall show you, this is no digression from our subject, the study of the Tattvas, but most intimately connected therewith. When you pray for strength, for health, for relief from pain, do you realize what answer comes back to you from divine silence? It says to you, take them. The avenues are always open to you. Nothing obstructs them but your own will and wrong thoughts. The moment you think health and strength yourself, that moment you begin to clear from all obstructions the channels of communication with the sources of life force. For every vibration on the mental plane reacts upon those of the physiological plane. Notice particularly that your very thought is instantly reflected in a fuller inflation of the lungs, which checks the disorder within and improves the vibrations. And throughout the universe like seeks like. Therefore, by a simple change of mental attitude, simple, but oh, so important, you invite harmony instead of discord, and cooperate with nature in her ceaseless efforts to restore all the disordered vibrations in your body to their normal conditions of perfect rhythmic balance. From the ever-blessed moment that you realize your soul to be the rightful ruler of its tenement, the physical body, and bring your will under the soul's control, thereby transmuting it into soul force, rhythmic vibrations will inaugurate their curative, restorative work. Say in your heart, peace, 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 yea, warring factions, yea, can no longer have dominion over me. I am one with all the power for good in the universe, and I will admit only good. The more you know of the Tattvic law of the universe, the deeper will be your conviction of these truths, and of the individual responsibility for health as the first condition for beginning to fulfill God's intentions when He first thought of you. Shakespeare's intuitions grasped a sublime truth. The world is a stage, and, like the actors in a play, to each and every one is assigned a given role. There is a part adapted to you as to no other, and yours is the task to develop those spiritual and moral qualities that lead to the perfection of your latent abilities, and give you the key, through intuitive comprehension, to the secrets of your strength and your weakness, both physical and moral. To obey the command, know thyself, is to learn the nature of these hidden forces, the Tattvas, whose ceaseless activities, governed or misgoverned, make us what we are. The varying effects of the different Tattvas in their activities within the physical body are as dissimilar as their characteristic qualities, and, therefore, the predominance of certain ones, even when that condition is normal, is unfortunate, and their excess is baneful. It is through the freedom of the will that you can control and correct the forces generated in your body, and draw to you the beneficent ones you desire. The characteristic form, features, and color in complexion, hair, and eyes which distinguish human beings one from the other, are due to the particular permutations of the tattvas, which, on the gross plane of their activities, make up the component elements of different physiques. Their mental influence is, of course, equally important and individual. The physiological being, in fact, its reflection. The opinions formed, the bent of every mind being due to the bias given to it by the prevailing elements, or tattvas. This individuality, stamped by the tattvas, is determined by the color, that is, the vibration of the planet under which one is born. This fact gives us the scientific basis for astrology, every planet being the center of a specific tattvic influence, just as are the ganglia of the nervous system. This agrees with and explains the puzzling tenet of Hermetic philosophy: as it is above, so is it below, and shows the close parallelism between the microcosm and the macrocosm. Always an acknowledged truth, modern science has yet to point out the first coincidence. The tattvic vibrations corresponding thus with the planets necessarily vary in force according to their movements. Every planet, and therefore the force of vibrations emanating from it, being modified in manifold ways according to its nearness to or remoteness from a sympathetic or a dominating sister orb. Much more concerning these correspondences will be developed in later chapters. It could not be so well understood now. It suffices to state here that every activity in man is a microcosmic reflection of macrocosmic activity. This tattvic influence is the energy, working by the same law, throughout the kingdoms, mineral, vegetable, and animal of this vast universe. Their myriads of permutations furnish the diversity which charms us, and their invariability, that ever-occurring unity of action that baffles the physicist with amazing paradoxes. In the process of evolution, every tattva, though retaining its essential primary qualities, the properties already described as differentiating one tattva from another, see Table of the Tattvas, Chapter 2, combines with the other tattvas in the proportions of 4:1, and in the mingling is modified by their qualities. Thus, every molecule of Vayu consists of 4 parts of Vayu and 1 each of the 4 other tattvas, forming a 5-fold division, together with 2 phases, negative and positive, which make up the mystic's 7-fold. This number is now recognized in science as establishing the periodic law or system, which, grouping elements according to their atomic weight, shows that elements of similar chemical behavior occur once in 7. That is, in octaves, as do the tones of the musical scale, bearing in mind the process of their evolution one after another from ethereal space to the cohesive resistance of Prithvi, the earth vibration. It should be understood that every successive tattva, even in its primary and most subtle form, becomes more complex, for it contains the impress of those preceding it. Thus, Prithvi partakes of the qualities of the 4 preceding tattvas, and adds its own specific property. 2 adjacent tattvas mingle more freely with each other than with the more remote ones. For example, Prithvi and Opas are more sympathetic and congenial than Tejas and Prithvi, and Opas yields to Tejas before it does to Vayu. We see this process exactly illustrated in the change of ice, Prithvic state of matter, through water to vapor. Akasha intervenes between every 2 states, receiving the cancelled vibrations of the element, passing into a latent condition and yielding the potentiality of the supervening element, continuing, you see, to serve as the bowl in which nature does her mixing. In physics, an important law of motion known as Newton's third law is this: for every action there is a reaction, equal in amount and opposite in direction. This principle governs all tattvic vibrations. In the separate tattvas, every atom is reacted upon by an opposite force, the negative atom by a positive atom, and when the equal and opposite vibrations of the same tattva meet, they cancel each other, and together pass into the Akashic state. An illustration of this law can be seen when two waves of equal size come together so that the crest of one falls into the trough of the other. Thus meeting, the waves are cancelled and smooth water results. At this conjunction, or rest point, is Akashic. For Akasha precedes and follows every change on every plane of motion and life. In the action of light waves, the same phenomenon has been observed whenever a difference of path brings passing waves so that the crest of one set of rays falls over the trough of the other set. The conjunction, Akashic, of the two beams of light produces darkness. The interference of sound, as when the condensed part of one sound meets the rarefied part of another, and they neutralize each other, producing silence, is yet another illustration of this physical law. It was formerly considered an acoustic paradox. These few illustrations show how the Tattvic law explains the most puzzling and contradictory secrets of nature's workshop. They are given only as index fingers pointing the way for every interested student to make original discoveries. This, to every real thinker, adds a zest which nothing else can give, and becomes a spur to constant effort and constant progress. Chapter 7. More about the all-pervading Tattva, Akasha. Recent scientific discoveries which have tumbled century-honored theories from their pedestals to an abyss where we are hastening to bury them in that oblivion of disuse which the world heaps upon its recognized errors, make it important to the student that a little more space be given to pointing out the interesting corroboration of the Tattvic law which we can find in all of these wonders. The greatest bar to scientific progress is stated in this trenchant form by me, Blavatsky. Pure force is nothing in the world of physics. It is all in the domain of spirit. Now, notice this particularly. It is the world of force which the modern scientist is beginning to penetrate. A world of such stupendous forces as astounds him, and at every step he is coming nearer to the Tattvic law. The 49 fires of the Vedas are the 7 permutations of the Tattvas and the 2 forces, hidden as yet and undefined, behind the positive and negative currents of prana. 7 by 7 equal 49. Every one of these has well-determined chemical and physical potencies in contact with terrestrial matter, and a distinct function in the physical and spiritual worlds, with a corresponding relation to a human psychic faculty. To the ancient Hindu adept, all these hidden forces were as an open book, and years ago India's initiates accurately predicted all the amazing discoveries and inventions of recent years, which have furnished new foundations for science and kept the world marveling. Out of the invisible, Sir William Crookes, with his radiant matter, and Röntgen, with his X-ray, lit 2 of these 49 fires. With the X-ray, the principle of radioactivity which revolutionized science was established, and it paved the way for the discovery of the 20th century marvel, radium, which disclosed radioactivity as an actual property of matter. No one conversant with the Tattvic law can doubt that radium and all the radioactive substances can be properly classified among the 49 fires of the Vedas. In all these progressions and permutations, the higher, more subtle plane, or state, of matter is positive to the next lower, and every lower one is the result of the interaction of the positive and negative phases of the next higher state. Radium furnishes us with invaluable data corroborating the Tattvic law, but in order to comprehend the velocity of these vibrations, which are ceaselessly bombarding us, and the intricacy of the Tattvic permutations, a few words concerning the nature of atoms will be helpful. The word atom is still defined in standard dictionaries and in textbooks upon physics published within the present decade as that ultimate particle of a molecule which is indivisible. In a very slipshod fashion, atom has also been defined as interchangeable with molecule, and, therefore, it has crept into very general usage in the same sense. Although a molecule is described as the smallest portion of any substance in which its properties reside, it is possible, by means of heat or some other chemical agent, to separate a molecule into two or more particles, called atoms, and these cannot be further divided was the ultimatum of natural philosophy. Until quite recently, the hydrogen atom was the smallest mass of matter known to science, and, therefore, the accepted unit of atomic weight. But what says Professor George Darwin as to this? It has been proved that the simplest of all atoms, namely, that of hydrogen, consists of 800 separate parts, while the number of atoms in the denser metals must be counted by tens of thousands. These separate parts have been called corpuscles, or electrons, and may be described as particles of negative electricity. It is paradoxical, yet true, that the physicist knows more about these ultra-atomic corpuscles and can more easily count them than is the case with the atom of which they form the parts. Some of these corpuscles move at a speed of 200,000 miles a second, and the unscientific reader will get a clearer idea of their minuteness if told that the molecule, of which they are parts, is so small as to be invisible even under the most powerful microscope. Sir William Thompson made this graphic comparison. If a drop of water as large as a pea were magnified to the size of the earth, the molecule would appear scarcely larger than the original drop. Radium gives off three kinds of rays which have been named respectively alpha, beta, and gamma. The alpha rays are compared to the ions, or tiny particles, which fly from red-hot metals. They are positively electrified, and the particles are about twice the mass of the hydrogen atom. These rays have a velocity of 20,000 miles a second, and are constantly emitted from radium in its natural state without perceptible loss to its substance any more than the exhalation of its odor changes a flower. The beta rays are negatively charged corpuscles, about 1/2000th the size of those making up the alpha rays, and, save for their greater velocity circa 100,000 miles a second, are said to exactly resemble the cathode rays produced by an electric discharge inside a Crookes tube. The gamma rays are not so well understood as the two others, but are believed to be identical with X-rays. Are they not the union of the alpha and beta rays after passing through the Akashic state, forming a Tattvas permutation? A spectrum analysis of the rays should determine this. The spectrum of every substance and element reveals its Tattvas nature by means of the prevalent color, or colors, and the greater the heat to which the matter is subjected, the nearer it approaches its solar, instead of terrestrial, state. Akasha is well named the all-pervading tattva, in chemical changes of one state of matter into another. You have been shown in these illustrations not only that Akasha intervenes, but how it acts, that it is the substratum, or base, in all phenomena or paradoxes, which baffles the scientist. As in things external, so it is within. And your observation of natural phenomena will aid vastly in the understanding of your own microcosm, wherein the Tattvas law comes under the influence of your thoughts and willpower, and the currents of prana may thereby be thrown entirely out of rhythmic balance. In consequence of its universal prevalence normally, it is not surprising to learn that the excessato, the law of the rhythmic breath of Akasha, is disastrous, and according to the phase of its activity causes discomfort or misfortune. Among the traits and emotions which give evidence of this predominance or excess are forgetfulness, covetousness, and obstinacy, headiness, and blindness, and unreason in matters concerning the affections. Emotions of repulsion, shame, and fear are due to the same source, and the tremor which shakes fear-stricken people comes from hollows in the veins caused by akashic vibrations in excess. To this effect is due the physical and mental tension which so unnerve the victim. The remedy, do you ask? What is free will for? if not to give us power to choose our thoughts and the deeds resulting therefrom. The bliss of ignorance is that we are not to blame if we do not know the error of certain thoughts and actions. Invariably, we must suffer both mentally and physically for such error. But only knowledge, bringing power, brings also responsibility. Never forget that it is the form of motion that causes the state, and that form can therefore change it. A caution is necessary here. It is impossible to energize the nerves when they are strained by constant tension. Paradoxical as it is, these two conditions are often confounded, but there is a marked distinction between tensing and energizing the nerves. The accepted theory of tension, considered mechanically as of a wire or rope, is the all-pervading Akasha to put all the strain upon it that it will bear. Nerve and muscle tension wears people tremendously because it is a stretching, straining, and sundering of atoms one from another which breaks down structure physiologically. In concentration of energy, as in the held breath exercise, the reverse is the condition. The atoms are compacted closer and closer together, and thrill with the force of unison and the harmony of synchronous motion. Thus the most delicate and finest nerve is raised to the power of a larger one, and the increase of energy throughout the nervous system corresponds. Face every mental or physical crisis first, by taking a few deep, full inspirations to change the air and thus the vibrations, that is, the form of action in the lungs, and follow this with 8 or 10 repetitions of the nerve purifying and nerve strengthening alternate breathing, as directed in Chapter 4. While thus breathing, look within, and seek that heart silence which carries you to the radiant center of your being, and laps you in poise and confidence. You will thus raise your vibrations to a higher plane, and in doing this you not only lift yourself into a state in sympathy with higher influences and draw them to you, but above conditions where unwholesome vibrations and thoughts, similar to those you may desire to expel, reach you. You are making for yourself a protecting sheath against demoralizing mundane influences of that earthy character which feeds materialism. Sympathetic vibrations are the wires upon which epidemics spread from victim to victim, and commonly that sympathy is fear. But courage and confidence can be made equally contagious. Happy, courageous thoughts draw the vibrations of happiness and courage, and, steadfastly maintained, will spread a contagion of health and happiness round about you.